So you can appreciate why they would look forward to the coming of the sun, or the coming of that great orb of day. Now, if you begin to see how these philosophies would come into people's minds and begin to grow, and people and children coming up would accept the same philosophies and ideas and promote them to their children and their children to their children, you begin to see how the philosophy of the war between light and darkness, that which was light was good, of course, because the light was always peaceful and it was good, and that was dark was bad. And therefore it was the basis for this animosity between the light and darkness. Okay, well, we've seen a lot of that, because that's carried over into our society sociologically, in the war between light and darkness. Okay, but as I said, light was good and dark was bad. And the sun, of course, is the light of the world. And they understood that. The ancients were not stupid. They saw that the sun was not God. They never believed that the sun was God, but they believed that it was the reproduction of God. It was the offspring of God. It was the most closest symbol that they could use to represent deity in heaven. So they figured that since your son looks a lot like you, well, maybe God looks a lot like the Son, or the Son looks a lot like the Father. Okay, so they realized that the Son, and I'm using this word sun as an Anglo-Saxon word today, the orb in the sky, whatever you want to call it, back then was understood to be the descendant of the Father, or the creator of the heavens. And so therefore they realized that this sun did not belong to anyone, it belonged to the heavens, so it belonged to God. So it was God's sun. And of course, every morning it came up, it was in the sky or in heaven, so therefore God's sun was in heaven. And God's son being in heaven, as I said, it was the son or the offspring of the Father. Well, they said that no one has ever seen the Father. No one can see God, but if the Son looks like God, then maybe the Son mimicked God. And so they said, so when you have seen the Son, you've seen the Father. Now, incidentally, it's interesting as to why the ancients believed that God was a father. Because in the most ancient world, they associated the creation of the humans and creation on earth with the mother. It was only until the coming of the early Roman Empire that the emphasis was then put on the male.
Right, as contrast to the African.
Yeah, absolutely. The African system was based on the female, and even the Greeks, when they borrowed everything from Africa, was Pistis Sophia, they said, which was feminine wisdom. And as I said, the ancient people knew that no one has ever seen God, no one can see God, but if you've seen the Son, you've seen the Father. And I was going to say the reason why the ancients believed, and some of the ancient people believed that God was a father. And it's interesting because of rain. Rain was perceived to be the fluid from the Father that gives a life or brings life to Mother Earth. And so when Mother Earth is impregnated with the fluid from the Father in heaven, then, the Mother Earth gives birth to all life. So that's where the concept of God the Father comes from rain. And in that area that we call today Israel was in its very ancient times called Canaan. And those people there, Canaanites, celebrated the great marriage feast, so to speak, between God the Father and Mother Earth, and all the light that the two of them produce for us. So they call this great celebration in the spring the marriage feast of Cana, where God's Son is asked by Mother Earth to draw water to make it rain so the grapes can grow, so we can have a wine feast and a feast which was called the marriage feast of Cana. That's where that comes from. And of course, the sun gives life to us in that it gives us our energy. It gives energy to all living things. We eat those living things and we get energy. So therefore, the sun is giving up its energy for us to live. So the ancients said that God's Son gives his life so that we may live. And the sun, of course, represented, because it's interesting, if the ancient Egyptians especially said that as long as the sun continues to come up in the morning, there's going to be life. There's obviously going to be life forever, as long as that sun comes up. And so therefore the sun became the symbol of everlasting life on the earth, but not for you, but on the earth, everlasting life. And of course, God's Son is our Savior in that he is risen. Of course, the ancients said that the sun, as much as wonderful as it was not going to save anybody if it didn't come up in the morning. If it don't come up in the morning, as gray as it was, we're dead. Therefore, he is our salvation. He is our Savior only if he is risen. And the Egyptians called that risen sun in the morning Horus. Horus was God's son. That was a name they gave him in Egypt, Horus. And they said that in the morning all Egyptians would get up to see the sun come up, and they're like an Easter sunrise service. And they would see the sun come up, and he was rising. And so you go out to see Horus, and he is risen. And that's why today, even when the sun comes up, it comes up on the Horus rising, or horizon. And of course, you had better thank the Father for sending his Son, because he is your life and he's your, he's your salvation. And of course, the ancients breathed a sigh of relief when they saw the sun come up, because they became more secure in their world. When they saw the sun come up, everything became clear and they could see all the animals, and they weren't afraid of the dark anymore. So consequently, the sun took on the position of being the Prince of Peace, because everyone felt much better and peaceful when the sun came up. So he was then considered the Prince of Peace. Now, as we said, the sun in Egypt was called Horus when it rose in the morning. And that's where, incidentally, he had 12 segments of lifespan in the daytime, so that's where we get the word hours. Hours comes from Horus. It's H-O-U-R-S or H-O-R-U-S. And so therefore the sun would come up on the horizon. And it's interesting too that in the Egyptian way of thinking, there was a second sun. God had a second son who was equal to the first, but was bad. His name was Set, or Set, S-A-T or S-E-T. And of course, Set was the evil son. He was dark, so that made him evil. And he would only come out as the Prince of Darkness after dark. Well, of course it got dark when the sun went down, and therefore Set came out like the boogeyman. He's going to get you, and he's dark. Therefore, that made him bad. Okay, now you have the two brothers, Horus and Set. One was light and one was darkness. Now comes the original Trinity in Egypt, which was the three lifespans of the sun, or the three lifespans in life, which is the newborn, the mature, and the old and dying, which was the original Trinity. Horus was the beginning as the newborn. Then at 12 noon, the sun was high over the pyramid. There was no shadow on the pyramid, so they knew it was 12 noon. Therefore, he was called, at that point, you couldn't go any higher in the sky, so he was called the Most High. So therefore, you have God's Son, Horus, and then the Most High at 12 noon, and then at night you have Set. And from there, that was your original Trinity. And of course, it's taken all sorts of turns coming down through history. But this is the basis for what we call today Christianity. But if you don't understand that, then you don't appreciate where the stories came from. And it has always amazed me how many people will understand Christianity but not understand that Christianity is nothing more than a retelling of the same age-old stories that have come down through time. As a matter of fact, the Bible is not called the greatest collection of facts ever assembled. It's called the greatest story ever told. And the reason why it's the greatest story ever told is because, to do a little homework, you're going to find out it's the oldest story ever told. As a matter of fact, it's the only story ever told. It's called astrotheology.